Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. I didn't have the translation in my ear, but so just to introduce myself, I understand the other guests have been introduced. We have BKM, Citibank, AK Bank, and also Brian from The Banker. And my name is Tanya Beckett. I'm a business news and news presenter for BBC World News. And we, as you probably have gathered, are one of the sponsors for this event, I believe. Yes, there we are. In the red there. Good. So we're just going to spend the next half an hour talking through some of the issues that have come up this morning. But I really would like you to participate in this because apart from anything else, it makes my job a lot easier. But it makes it more interesting too. So this is your chance really to interact a little bit more, and I'd like you to do that. So Brian, let me start with you as a sort of more generalist point. It seems that there is a fair diversity between what's happening in the banks in, for example, Europe and North America, than what we see in Turkey, where we clearly see a very progressive growth rate and we see a very, very young population. That clearly affects the functioning and indeed the branding of the banks.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're talking about this over coffee, yeah. So in some ways, the message we've brought from London of doom and gloom and kind of loss of trust in the banking sector does not apply. Well, it'd be interesting to hear what everybody's got to say, but does not apply, I think, so much in some of the strong emerging markets like Turkey. But well, let's not forget, Turkey had its own banking crisis in 2001. So, and most countries do have a banking crisis every now and again. And I think it's true to say that with most people in most countries, I mean, banks are not their favorite player in the market, right? So even before we had the banking crisis internationally, I mean, if you ask people what they thought about banks, it was usually either neutral or negative. And I think what we're trying to do today is move it from negative to neutral to positive. And I think that's what really this conference is about. And I think a lot of good work has been done in Turkey. As we saw the presentation from Akbank earlier on, I think they're one of the leaders, as I said in my presentation, in reaching out, because Turkey has such a young population, because they're internet savvy, because they're big on social media. I think that they've confronted these things full on. They've also had the advantage of investing in the latest technology, so leaping 2 or 3 generations in technology. So you've got the best technology, and you've got some of the great marketing strategies here. But I think it's not true to say that Turkey can just sit back and say this is a Western problem; it doesn't apply to us. Clearly, there have been crises in the past here, and banks face challenges all over the world.
Okay, the BKM is, of course, an intermediary, so you're a very good person to ask about how you perceive whether Turkish banks have been caught in the banking crisis in terms of reputation.
İngilizce bir soruya Türkçe cevap vereceğiz. Aslına bakarsanız 2001 krizi sonrasında bir bankacı olarak biz dünyanın sonunun geldiğini düşünmüştük hep beraber. Çok mutsuzduk, çok keyifsizdik ve başımıza gelebilecek en büyük sıkıntılardan birini yaşadığımız bir dönem olduğunu düşünmüştük. Ama 2008'deki küresel durgunluğa geldiğimiz zaman o 2001'de yaşadıklarımızın Türkiye için ne kadar büyük bir faydalı tecrübe olduğunu, olumlu tecrübe olduğunu düşündük. Ve 2008-2013 geçen son 5 senede de bunu aynen teyit eden gelişmeler yaşıyoruz. Dolayısıyla hatta biraz evvel konuşmamı bitirdikten sonra yanına oturduğum misafirlerimizden bir tanesinin yorumu çok güzeldi beyefendinin. Yabancı konuklarımız bankacıları cehennemde, Türkler cennette gösteriyorlar gibi bir ifade kullandınız. Gerçekten çok doğru. Biz şu anda Türkiye'de bankacılık sektörünü bir cennet olarak tasvir ediyor olmamızın sebebi sektörün şu anda geldiği çok güçlü nokta, geçmişten aldığı dersler ve önümüzdeki döneme dair yaptığı planların çok güçlü bir tabana oturmasından kaynaklanıyor. Yurt dışındaki olumsuz hava ise maalesef gerek Kuzey Amerika'da gerekse Avrupa bölgesindeki bankaların ülkelerinden kaynaklanan artan riskleri ve bankaların kendi sorunlarından kaynaklı daha küresel büyük ölçekli riskler. Dolayısıyla iki tarafta iki farklı ekstremi yaşıyoruz. Bizim şu anda önümüzdeki en önemli aslına bakarsanız avantaj bu aradaki farkı görüp hep ileriye bakıp geçmişte olanlardan ders alarak biraz daha dikkatli, sürdürülebilir bir büyüme yolunda dev adımlarla gitmemiz lazım. O açıdan yaşadığımız bugünkü durum bizi rehavete sürüklemeden dikkatli ve emin adımlarla yolumuza devam ettiğimizi söyleyebilirim.
Okay, now we've heard another reference to growth there. At AK Bank, are you concerned that that yes, you're experiencing growth, but with it comes increased risk? No, sorry, this gentleman here. I was talking about the AK Bank.
Okay.
Yep.
Shall I proceed in English or Turkish?
Whatever you feel comfortable in. I mean, I suspect our audience is Turkish largely,
Okay, then-
so that would be more appropriate.
Then I'll switch to
Yeah.
Turkish. Öncelikle herkese günaydın, hoş geldiniz. İsmim Galip Tözge. Akbank'ta bireysel bankacılıktan sorumluyum. Bizim sektörümüzde ve bütün matematiğe dayalı sektörlerde bir tanım vardır. Yani Türkiye'deki bankacılık sektörünün bugün iyi olması bir tesadüf değildir. It's not a coincidence. Soner Bey'in de bahsettiği gibi 2002'den sonra bence diğer özellikle Batı Avrupa, Amerika ve Uzak Doğu'ya göre Türkiye'deki bankacılık sisteminin en büyük farkı krizden sonra kurulan çok sıkı regülasyonlardır. BDDK'dır açıkçası. Bizler tabii mesleğin içindeki olan insanlar ne kadar kontrollü ilk başta çok hoşumuza gitmese de açıkçası bugün Türkiye'deki bankacılık sisteminin çok sağlıklı olmasının %16,5-17'lerde Amerika'nın Avrupa'nın yaklaşık 3 katı kadar sermaye yeterlilik rasyosu olmasının sebebi tabii ki Türkiye'deki bu işi çok iyi yapan saygın bankacılardır. Bizler gibi. Ama çok önemli bu kredinin çok önemli bir kısmı da bizim baş regülatörümüz BDDK'ya aittir. Ben açıkçası onu da bir net out etmek isterim. Soner Bey'in bıraktığı yerden hakikaten bizler eskiden ben işim gereği daha önce de bir yabancı bankada çalışıyordum. Çok sık yurt dışına gidiyorduk. Hala da öyle. Bundan 12 sene önce yurt dışına gidince benim moralim bozuluyordu. Çünkü yani bizdeki yüksek enflasyon, Avrupa'daki uygulamalar falan. Şimdi açıkçası Avrupa'ya, Amerika'ya gidince benim çok moralim yükseliyor. Şu anda çünkü maalesef Avrupa'daki işte herkes deleveraging, işlerimi nasıl küçülterim, aktiflerimi nasıl küçültürüm ki sermaye yeterlilik rasyomu arttırırım. Hani sabahleyin Hakan Bey'in anlattığı teknoloji yatırımları falan zaten hiç kimsenin radarında değil. Çünkü siz ilk önce bilançonuzu kurtarmanız lazım. Bırakın inovasyonu, müşteriye yenilik getirmeyi falan. Bambaşka bir şey. Ve yani ben oradaki ilk cümlemi de tekrarlamak istiyorum ki bugün Avrupa Birliği'nde de bu konuşuluyor. Ortak bir bankacılık sektörünü regüle eden, özellikle Avrupa'daki sistemin en büyük eksikliği, her ülkenin kendi kendine yaptığı, kurduğu ayrı regulatory agency'ler var. Hepsinin izlediği rasyolar, kurallar, compliance kuralları farklı. Ama bütün EU'yu regüle eden bir tane, bizdeki BDDK benzeri bir regulatory body yok. Ve bu aralarda özellikle bu işte Almanya çıkışlı görüşlerin çok ortak noktası. Ben açıkçası bir de olaya bu perspektifi getirmek istiyorum. Ben biraz önce de çay alısında konuşuyorduk. Yani bizim bugün Türkiye'de bankacılığın bir rönesans yaşamasının en önemli sebeplerinden bir tanesi bu sektörün, ki reel ekonomi içinde çok önemli bir trigger olan bu sektörün son derece iyi regüle edilmesidir. Hatırlayalım, BDDK yaklaşık 6-7 senedir bankaların dağıttığı veya dağıtmayı düşündüğü kar paylarını, dividendlarını bile regüle eder durumdadır. Bunlar çok açıkçası çok önemlidir. Başta bizlerin canını sıkmıştır, zorlamıştır bizim gibi oyuncuları. Ama bugüne gelen noktada Bütün bankacılar, bizler bunu çok saygıyla karşılıyoruz. Sektörümüzün en önemli güçlerinden bir tanesi oldu.
Okay, well that's brought an interesting point up about the link between regulation and the need for stronger capital and innovation. Jane, at Citibank, are you finding that there is a cap on innovation precisely because of this problem? Does it hamper innovation?
Innovation is very much core to our brand. Sorry.
Should we use a microphone? Yeah.
Innovation is very much core to our brand. And I don't think it should be limited by capital. I think you can look at, although obviously that is a challenge, but you can look at driving innovation through any organisation. And actually, I'd argue that when you have less money, that's really when you have to be more innovative and when you come up with some of the best solutions.
Okay, is anybody from the audience wanting to ask any questions right now? Could you say, if you do ask a question, what your name is and where you're from? And preferably who you're directing your question to. Yes, please, this gentleman at the front.
Yes, my name is Tarkan Yavuz. I have a question for Brian, please. In your chart, you are informing us that the top 25 European banks, Germany was like number 10. And Spain was in front of Germany with all these problems, and France was like number 5. Yeah. So we thought that Germany was the locomotive of the European industry and trade and everything. So how come the German banks fall so behind Spain and France?
Yeah, this is a good question, Brian. Could you just remind us on what basis you were ranking the banks in Europe? To what slide he's referring to?
Yeah, okay. I think you're referring to the country slides, are you? Where so you have a brand value, a total value, and the number of brands in each country. Okay, that's the one that Turkey came 18th in. Okay. Well, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, Germany has always been regarded as a country, although it's a major economic force and a manufacturing powerhouse, it's always been regarded as a country with a rather poor banking sector in some ways. And certainly the ruling ideas or the orthodoxy before the financial crisis was that the model of running banks, which was prevalent in the UK and, by the way, in Spain, where it was very much driven by shareholder returns, market share, and huge competition, was the way to go ahead. And as a result of that, you've got very strong brands in those countries. So if you think about Spain, you've got 2 international banking brands there. So Santander and BBVA, very strong operations in Latin America, Santander also in North America and now the UK. And they've really built up those brands. So I think that still remains the case. I think there is a more, and Germany never had that, right? So Germany only really has one strong international brand, which is Deutsche Bank. Even that, the investment bank is run out of London. It's not run out of Germany. And then you start to get down to a banking sector which is very largely a state-owned sector or a regional banking sector. So you have the Sparkassen, the German savings banks, and the cooperative banks. And the criticism of those banks, again, before the crisis, has been very much that they didn't allocate money very efficiently. They weren't run for the benefits of shareholders. They were run more for the benefits of the local municipality. Obviously, there's been some rethinking done since then, right? So now we're saying, well, hang on a minute. This focus on shareholder returns above everything else in banking has probably been one of the causes that led to the banking crisis. So if you're only thinking about the next quarterly earnings and you're not thinking about long-term strategy and growth and you're not thinking about risk management seriously, you've got a problem. And in some ways, the German banking model is beginning to look a bit more attractive, especially the way that the German banks are able to finance the Mittelstand, or the small and medium-sized companies in Germany, which is something which is envied by other countries. So I think, I mean, that hopefully is the explanation about why Spain would have stronger brands than Germany. Whether it's the same in 10 years' time, I'm not so sure. Okay.
Any other questions, please? Yes, this gentleman at the front, please.
İsmim Murat Kaan Güner'i, MKG ve ortaklarının kurucu ortağıyım. 2001'de uluslararası bir finans kurumunun Türkiye temsilcisini ziyaret etmiştik Ankara'da. Ve o sırada bankalarımız takır takır kapanıyordu, el değiştiriyordu, el konuluyordu. Yani nasıl oluyor bunlar dedim, yani nereye kadar gidecek, bunun bir sonu var mı dedim. Aslında dedi, gelirken bir caddeden geçtiniz dedi. Ben Ankara'yı bilmem, ünlü caddelerinden bir tanesi. Burada kaç tane banka var, saydınız mı dedi. Yok hayır dedim. Ben saydım, 10 tane banka şubesi var, farklı farklı bankaların. Bir tane çiçekçi, bir tane de bakkal var dedi. O zamanlar 82 tane falan bankamız vardı. Sonra bunların sayısı aşağıya gitti. Sizce kaç tane normal dedim. Valla 3 tane özel banka, bir tane de devlet bankası idealdir Türkiye çaplı bir kurum için, ülke için dedi. Benim tahminimde 15-20 idi. Ben yaklaştığımı düşünüyordum. Bir dengeye oturdu. Avrupa bankalarının cazibe merkezi haline geldi Türkiye. Şimdi bakıyorum batıdan gelen bankalar yavaş yavaş devredip veya çıkıp kendi ülkelerine veya core merkezlerine yöneliyorlar. Ama öte yandan Körfez'deki finans kaynakları ve bankaların için cazibe merkezi haline gelmeye başladı. Bu değişimi ben sormak isterim. Hem Türkiye'deki kurumları temsil eden arkadaşlarıma hem de yurt dışından gelen misafirlerimize. Yani bu değişimi, Türkiye merkezli bu değişimi nasıl görüyorsunuz, nasıl yorumluyorsunuz? Teşekkürler.
So the question being really, how attractive is Turkey at the moment for foreign banking entrants?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Who
you.
wants to have a crack at that question? Yeah, this seems to be, okay from AK perspective.
Ben hala Türkiye'nin bankacılık anlamında gerek Avrupa, Asya, Amerika çok hala çekici olduğunu düşünüyorum Murat Bey. Yani birkaç tane data. Yani Türkiye'de bugün bankable popülasyon yaklaşık 30-32 milyon. Yani Türkiye nüfusunun 18 yaşın üstündekileri sayarsak hala yaklaşık 12-13 milyon daha yaş olarak 18'in üstünde ama bankacılık sistemine girmemiş insanlar var. Ki hani zaten memleketimizin güzel hikayesini biliyoruz. İşte jeopolitik fırsatlarımız, nüfusumuz, yani bütün o yani güzel hikayeyi tekrar etmek istemiyorum. Bence son zamanlardaki bu çıkışların sebebi Türkiye'deki potansiyelin azalması değil. Maalesef işte Amerika'daki, Avrupa'daki firmaların, yani ana firmaların, parent company'lerinin sıkıntısındandır. Yani son zamanlardaki ben hareketi ona bağlıyorum. Benim o teorimi de özellikle Asya bankalarının girmesi de bence teyit ediyor. Çünkü hani krizden sonra özellikle sermaye birikimi hepimizin bildiği gibi batıdan doğuya doğru shift ettiği için doğuda sermaye yapısı daha güçlü. Türkiye gibi potansiyel piyasalara ama rekabetçi piyasalara, uzun vadeli piyasalara para ayıracak sermaye daha fazla doğudan gelmeye başladı. Bu da işte 2008'den sonra Avrupa'da ve Amerika'da yaşanan sıkıntılardan. Yani özetle ben Türkiye'nin potansiyelinin azalmadığını, tam tersi arttığını inanıyorum. Ama bu da tabii affordability işi. Yani üçüncü noktamda yani Türkiye esasında pazarı dışarıdan gözüktüğü kadar da kolay bir pazar değil. Tabii dışarıdan gelen yabancılar bunların da bir kısmını exercise etti. Şu anda Türkiye'de bireyselden kurumsala, yatırım bankasından yatırım fonlarına kadar her alanda rekabetin hani tabiri caizse kıran kırana olduğu bir şey. Ondan hakikaten Türkiye'ye gelecek bir bankanın kısa değil mutlaka uzun dönemli olması lazım. Çünkü içerideki oyuncular yani en küçüğünden en büyüğüne kadar hepsi çok rekabetçi. Zor bir piyasa ama çok yüksek bir potansiyel piyasa. Açıkçası ben yani batıdaki bankaların sermaye yeterlilik rasyoları kuvvetlendikçe İnşallah 2013, 2014, 2015 buraya ilginin, alakanın artarak devam edeceğini umuyorum. Teşekkür ederim.
Yes, Brian, please. Yes, if you want to. Yeah, in a second.
Yeah, I mean, in my view, actually, one of the most tragic consequences of the financial crisis has been exactly as you've described, which is that a lot of the international banks have had to sell off their foreign assets, and you've seen some absurd things going on. So the Swiss bank UBS bought a big Brazilian bank, Pactual, and then when they had their financial crisis, they just had to sell it back to the original owners at a loss. And I mean, the tragedy of it is that for these big international banks, this was clearly where the growth was going to come from now, and so they've sold off in a way some of the best assets they have with the best potential for growth in order to shore up capital. And now you're looking at banks, some of the international banks that are going to be much more focused on their domestic market. So if you think about Royal Bank of Scotland, which sold stakes in big Chinese banks and is now looking at mostly being a domestic player. I mean, that's really going to be the lasting legacy of the crisis. As you correctly said, other banks do have capital, and you're seeing banks from the Gulf states particularly, and from Lebanon, take stakes in Turkish banks where they can get hold of them. I don't think that the international banks are going to be lucky in the sense that by the time they've rebuilt their capital, the opportunities are still going to be available in Turkey for them to come and buy back what they already sold. By that time, it's going to be too expensive, and some of that, the growth is really going to accelerate over the next 4 or 5 years. And if they're back in 5 years' time, it's going to cost more, and the potential is not going to be as for the same degree of acceleration as you would have. So those foreign banks that are already here or just coming in, it's absolutely fantastic for them. It's really a tragedy for the international banks.
Jane, is there much opportunity for Citibank in this part of the world?
I can't comment on this one.
Okay. All right, let's come to this lady here.
İsmim Semamete, VIP Türkiye dergisi yurt dışı temsilcisiyim. Cemiyet ve İş Dünyası dergisi. Benim sorum Brian Bey olacak. HSBC'nin bu kadar değer kaybetmesinin sebebi nedir? Birinci sorum sizce sizin bakış açınızla. İkinci sorum da tabloda Amerikan bankaları çok iyi üstlerde çıktı, fakat Amerikan bankalarından bazılarının da para arayışına geçtiğini ve yakında kapatmak üzere olduğunu duyumlarını aldık. Bu konularla ilgili neler söyleyeceksiniz?
Okay, so this is the relationship between brand value and capital, is what you were saying, and why has HSBC lost so much ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the ranking shows is that when you're talking about bank brand values, some of these big global brands are still extremely strong. So when you talk about Citigroup, Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, I mean, they still have colossal brand values, and they have international brand reach, which clearly, most banks in most domestic markets around the world don't have. I'll come on to HSBC in a minute. But so it was actually a rather good year for American banks. It's true that they still face, like all international banks, huge challenges in terms of regulation. But I mean, the leading players in the States have rebuilt their capital now, and they've actually in some cases, the government has sold its shares that it had in them and made a profit out of them. And at the same time, they're benefiting from the fact that the American economy does seem to be turning around. I'm not saying that it's out of the woods yet, but I mean, it's turning around. You're seeing growth there. So I think that's a general positive for American banks. And as I said earlier, they did actually increase their total brand value by some quite significant amount, almost the equivalent of another city or another Bank of America. The UK banks, in particular HSBC, did have a very bad year. Again, I'd like to put it in context because, I mean, HSBC is still a very, very strong brand, so it's still third in the world, and you've seen the marketing that HSBC has done and how effective it's been in every airport, and it still remains one of the strongest brands in the world. But they did have a very bad year, and there's a couple of things going on. One is that they ran into trouble with the US authorities over money laundering in Mexico, had to pay a huge fine. The second thing is that HSBC is undergoing a massive restructuring. So under the new chief executive, Stuart Gulliver, they've been selling off about 30 or 40 businesses around the world. They've been getting out of all the small little businesses they had in many countries where they thought it didn't make sense, it wasn't a viable operation. So if you downscale your operation like that, it's going to have an effect on future earnings, and that's going to impact on your brand value.
Okay, yes, please.
I want to ask a question to Jane as a marketing person. Last year, most of the UK banks lost most of their brand values. Even they have huge marketing budgets. What is which one is the most important value driver? Why they lost their values? Reputation or else?
Reputation or what?
Else. What else?
Oh, what else?
As
Okay.
value driver.
So why do you think
Which
the US banks have lost their reputation or their brand value, given the fact that they spend a lot of money on marketing? There's only so much you can do as a marketeer, I suppose, Jane.
Exactly. There's only so much an ad can do, sadly, even though we like to think that it does everything. I think there's kind of several elements in this. And obviously, we've been victim of the whole financial services crisis. So our brands have inevitably been impacted in that way. But actually, I also think that from a marketing perspective, the fact that a lot of our budgets, and particularly what I see across Europe, Middle East and Africa, is we haven't been focusing on actually what our true value is, and to the point that I was making earlier about standing for something and telling our customers what they can expect from a service perspective. So a lot of the advertising, when we look at competitor ads, and I mean advertising generically, so whether it be emails or any other communication, they tend to be focused on rate or very left brain elements. It's very rational argument. And actually, I think the banks, this is where we do need to look at different sectors. And I think we're starting to do that and starting to see that much more. But giving our customers that emotional reason to choose us rather than just the rational reasons of rate. Does that answer your question?
And Jane, since the financial crisis, no doubt there has been a lot of thinking about how to repitch the brand, even though the banking crisis was not so much about retail banking, but more about investment banking.
It's repitching the brand, but it's very much the brand rather than advertising. So it's really going back to our true DNA. And, we were talking about this last night at dinner with Akbank very much, in that, CSR type activities, they very much seem to be a true element, and as I say, true to their DNA of Akbank. And indeed, that's true of a lot of banks. I think it's looking at really what makes that bank and that business tick, and then actually starting to look back at that and communicate that out to the world, so that staff, as well as customers, really understand what we stand for as a bank. And again, that's something that we very much at Citi, like I'm sure everybody does, looks at their bank, looks at their brand positioning, and says, how do we really truly live and breathe that, and make sure that everybody understands it.
Lovely. Okay, yes, please. The lady there.
Yeah, I'm Havva Canbek from Akbank. I have two questions. First one is building on Jane's response. Are there really any emotions that can bank build on their images? I mean, because banks are doing business with money and it's kind of rational thing. Are there really any emotions?
I have a very great emotional attachment to my money. Jane, how do you feel about yours?
I feel very emotionally attached to mine too.
But what sort of it's an interesting question. What sort of emotions are you trying to elicit? Is it that you want people, you would try to make somebody feel secure, or to feel that whatever situation they're in, wherever in the world, they can get out of it using money?
I think security is a very important thing. But I also think customers like not to think about their finances in many ways until suddenly it really matters. So whether you're trying to buy a new house or whether you need to make a payment, it's almost when it lets you down. So if your credit card isn't accepted somewhere, suddenly it becomes very, very important to you. And actually that's the point where I think we as banks need to be there for our customers. So I'll tell you a very quick anecdote about when I was on holiday in Marrakesh years ago. And actually my credit I got my credit card out to buy a very lovely necklace, as you do. So sorry, very girly comment. But actually, about half an hour later, I got a phone call from the bank. Now, this was my first payment in Marrakesh, so having left the UK only a few hours earlier. And they said, hi, went through the security questions and said, we just want to check, are you okay? Are you in Marrakesh? Have you just bought something in this store? Now, actually, that could have felt very Big Brother. But for me, it was a real sense of reassurance and that they were caring about me. They were looking after my best interests. And again, just another quick anecdote. I was living in California in a ski resort, 3 hours from San Francisco. My flatmate had decided to tidy the house that we were living in, or my housemate had. And she'd forgotten where she'd put my credit card. So me thinking I'd lost them, I cancelled them. A certain credit card holder had a courier on my doorstep 4 hours later with my new card. Another bank, who shall remain nameless, sent a letter to my parents' address. 2 weeks later it arrived, saying that my credit card was now at my local branch in the UK, ready to collect. Now, bearing in mind I'd been travelling around the world and they should have known that for about 18 months. Which bank do you think I feel more loyal to and emotionally attached to? So the point being of those anecdotes is I think we can absolutely and we should be striving to have our customers' best interests at heart, not just what makes us profitable. Because actually we know that if that's the case, I don't even want to declare how many products I have with this bank that called me telling me that delivered my credit card to my doorstep. And so again, the profits come as a result. So personal anecdote.
I have another question. We have been talking about this negative image that banks have all around the world. Although Turkish banks have good reputation in the global banking sector, I don't think customers in Turkey think about, any differently about banks in Turkey as well. So my question is, are there really any banks in the world that have changed this negative image? There was a cooperative bank example in Anthony's presentation. There's also Wells Fargo, which is at the top of the brand value ranking. And so the question is, does the brand value translate into the customer satisfaction or vice versa?
Brian, I think that has to be a question from you. It's your slide which she's talking about.
I think there are signs of it, right? I think it's a very good question. So it's like, is there one bank out there you could say that fulfilled somebody's idea of a dream? And I think probably the answer is no. And on the first thing is, I thought, Jane's anecdote was really interesting, but I still think that it will be very difficult for a bank to please its customers in the same way that an Apple or an Amazon does, these consumer brands. However, I think there is stuff that can be done, like delivering your replacement credit cards within 4 hours. And I think there are examples around the world of banks that have got some of it right. I think Akbank has got some of it right. I think there's some Brazilian banks like Itaú, which has very advanced technology and very good customer reputation. I think HSBC has got some of it right. Do I think one bank has got it all right? No. And do I think a bank will ever have a brand image the same as Apple or Amazon? Then I don't think that's likely either.
Why not?
Because I just think it's a different kind of business, isn't it? Right? So it's like, you're not ever going to have people are fanatical about Apple, aren't they? So, you have an Apple store and you've got people queuing around the block for, the latest iPad or whatever, right? But people are not, I don't think people are ever going to feel as strongly about that, about a bank as they do about a consumer product. But but the banks could develop this service culture in terms of, was the bank helpful to me when I most needed them? And unfortunately, in the financial crisis, a lot of customers, and particularly business customers, thought that the banks were extremely unhelpful to them when they most needed them. So, when the chips were down, they just cut their credit lines. So that's really a step backwards, I think. But that long-term relationship with customers and providing security and service when you need it, that's the direction we have travel. That's where we have to go.
Actually, can I just build on
Please
that?
do, Jane.
I think telling customers what you stand for, as you've heard me say, is a really vital piece. But if you don't deliver against that, then actually you probably shouldn't have told them that you stand for that in the first place. So I do think it's a combination, and I think there is no reason, personally, I think there's no reason why a bank shouldn't be one of the top global brands, both on an emotional and a rational basis. And I think we need to aspire to do that and to achieve it as quickly as possible.
Any more questions for our Turkish guests? Anybody got any Turkey-related
bir soru
questions?
sormak istiyorum Jane'e. Bundan 4 ya da 5 yıl önce tanıdık olduğum bir olayı sormak istiyorum. Katar emirinin eşi Şayka Hanım duymuyor mu?
Yes, would you? Yeah.
Katar emirinin eşi Şayka Hanım burada Nişantaşı'nda bir lüks ayakkabı satan bir mağazaya girmişti ve okay.
Does anybody know the rest of the story?
Taksın isterseniz.
Sounds like another glamorous retail story, so I'm all ears. Sorry? Jane, this one's right up your street, I think.
Okay.
Okay, have you got it on? Switch this button on the front. Just press that. There you go.
Okay. 3-4 yıl önce birebir tanık olduğum bir olay. Burada Katar emirinin eşi Türkiye ziyaretinde Şayka Hanım çok lüks bir ayakkabı mağazasına girmişti ve akşam saat 8.30-9 civarlarıydı. Kredi kartı limiti o an yetmedi. Aldığım miktar çoktu çünkü. Ve gece yarısı 8.30'da eşini aradı ve bankayı açtırdı. Sizce yani bu tamamen paranın gücü. Hani Şayka ertesi günde basına geçti. Şayka gece yarısı banka açtırdı diye. Hani bu böyle bir davranış şeklinin halk üzerindeki etkisi, buna tamamen paranın gücü diyebilir miyiz Jane? Yani bankanın sahibisiniz ve gece yarısı banka açtırıyorsunuz.
Could you use the mic, Jane?
Sorry, I forgot the mic. I'll take this off now if that's okay. Gosh, great story. I don't know how to answer that one.
I'm not sure whether the central point is the shoes or opening the bank.
Yes,
I'm
no,
more fascinated by the shoes.
I'm distracted by the shoes as well.
Distracted totally.
Bankanın açılması.
I think the point being is virtual channels enable us to deliver those sorts of services. I'm not suggesting necessarily opening the bank for one person versus another is a good thing, because actually I don't think it is. However, what we need to strive to do is to deliver that sort of service to each of our customers. So it may be that more valuable customers need a certain type of service. However, each of us are important, and each of our customers, our clients, are important. And the more we can strive towards delivering against those needs, then the better. That's why I loved virtual channels. So digital channels does enable us to, make funds. So 10, 15 years ago, would I have been paying my bills at 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday? No. But actually now I can. And that's where I think actually being able to accommodate those changes in customer needs is something that we need to strive to do. And that's why, again, understanding our customer needs is very vital to us, rather than us just sitting there in, you know, some ivory tower in Canary Wharf, in my case, saying, oh, I think a customer would like this. We really need to go out and understand and listen to our customers as to what they genuinely need and would value from a bank. I think that's quite an extreme example. But
Yes, well, on that fantastic note about shoes, and let's only hope that she bought enough matching handbags. I wouldn't like to stand between you and your lunch, so thank you very much indeed for listening, and thank you very much indeed to all of our panellists. Thank you.